The fluorescent lights of Jefferson High buzzed like angry wasps above Maya Henderson's head as she stood frozen in the crowded hallway. Her hands trembled around the straps of her backpack while 300 pairs of eyes watched her humiliation unfold in real time. Someone had taped a crude drawing to her locker, a stick figure with exaggerated features and the words, "Scholarship Trash," scrawled beneath it in thick black marker. The laughter started small, a few snickers from the cluster of athletes near. The water fountain then spread like wildfire through the corridor until it became a roaring wave of mockery that made her ears ring. Maya was 17, a junior with a perfect grade point average and dreams of studying engineering at MIT. She had earned her place at this private school through merit, not money, but that distinction had painted a target on her back from the moment she walked through the doors 2 years ago. Her uniform was always pressed, her shoes always polished, her natural hair styled with care, but none of it mattered to the students, who saw her as an intruder in their world of generational wealth and casual privilege. The ringleader of her torment stood 10 feet away, arms crossed and smirking with practiced cruelty. Chelsea Whitmore was everything Maya was not: blonde, wealthy, and protected by a last name that appeared on 3 different buildings on campus. Her father sat on the board of directors, her mother chaired the PTA, and her grandfather had been a senator. Chelsea had never worked for anything in her life, yet she carried herself with the confidence of someone who believed the world owed her obedience. "What's wrong, Henderson?" Chelsea called out, her voice dripping with false concern. "Don't you like our artwork? We thought you might appreciate some realistic representation." Her friends dissolved into giggles, recording the scene on their phones with the casual cruelty of people who had never faced consequences for their actions. Maya's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had learned early that showing emotion only fed the beast. With deliberate care, she peeled the drawing from her locker, folded it neatly, and tucked it into the front pocket of her backpack. Evidence. Her father had taught her to document everything, to build a case before striking. She opened her locker, without a word, retrieved her calculus textbook, and closed the metal door with a controlled click that echoed through the suddenly quiet hallway. As she walked past Chelsea and her entourage, Maya kept her head high and her shoulders squared. She could feel their eyes boring into her back, could hear the whispered comments that followed her like shadows, but she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not here. Not now. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly before her, each step requiring more strength than the last, but she made it to her classroom door before the first tear threatened to fall. Inside the empty room, Maya sank into her seat and pressed her palms flat against the cool surface of the desk. Her breathing came in shallow gasps as the weight of constant vigilance crashed down on her shoulders. This was her life, a daily gauntlet of microaggressions and outright hostility that left her exhausted before first period even began. She wondered, not for the first time, how much longer she could endure this isolation, this relentless campaign to make her feel small in the place where she had every right to exist. The bell rang, signaling the start of class, and students began filtering in. Maya straightened in her chair, wiped her eyes quickly, and opened her textbook to the correct page. She became the model student again, the quiet girl who always knew the answers, who never caused trouble, who absorbed every insult without complaint. But beneath the surface, something was beginning to shift, a quiet fury that had been building for 2 years, gathering strength in the darkness, waiting for the moment when silence would no longer be an option. The cafeteria at Jefferson High was a carefully choreographed social ecosystem where every table represented a distinct hierarchy. The athletes claimed the center, the drama kids occupied the corner near the stage, the honor students clustered near the windows, and Maya Henderson sat alone at the very edge of the room. as far from the action as physically possible without leaving entirely. She had learned to prefer solitude. It was safer than risking rejection, easier than pretending she belonged in conversations about expensive vacations and designer clothes she could never afford. Her lunch consisted of a peanut butter sandwich, made that morning, an apple from the discount bin, and a thermos of water, simple, practical, and impossible to mock. She ate slowly, reading her physics textbook between bites, trying to make herself invisible. But invisibility was a luxury Chelsea Whitmore refused to grant her. "Oh my God, is that a second-hand textbook?" Chelsea's voice cut through the ambient noise like a knife. She stood beside Maya's table with her usual crew, Brittany, Madison, and Savannah, all dressed in the latest fashion trends, all wearing identical expressions of manufactured disgust. "Look, you can see the name of the previous owner written inside. That's actually disgusting." Maya didn't look up. She turned the page of her textbook with deliberate calm, refusing to engage. This was her strategy: deny them the reaction they craved, starve them of the drama they fed on, outlast them through sheer stubbornness. Chelsea was not deterred. She reached down and plucked the apple from Maya's tray, holding it up to examine it like a specimen in a laboratory. "And she eats bruised fruit. Does your dad not make enough money fixing cars, or does he just not care about you?" The mention of her father made something tighten in Maya's chest. Marcus Henderson was a master mechanic who worked 12-hour days to support his daughter's education, who came home with grease permanently embedded under his fingernails, who had never once complained about the sacrifices he made. He was the best man Maya knew, and hearing his name twisted into an insult ignited a spark of anger she struggled to contain. "Give it back," Maya said quietly, still not looking up. "Give what back?" Chelsea tossed the apple casually from hand to hand, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "This sad little piece of fruit? I'm doing you a favor. Someone with your complexion should be more careful about their appearance. Can't have people thinking scholarship students don't know how to take care of themselves." The words landed with precision, designed to wound without crossing the line into explicit racism that might bring administrative consequences. Chelsea was practiced in this art: the carefully coded language, the plausible deniability, the attacks that left no visible bruises but caused damage nonetheless. Maya stood up. The metal legs of her chair scraped against the linoleum floor, and the sound silenced the immediate area. Students turned to watch, sensing that something different was about to happen. For 2 years, Maya had absorbed every insult without response. For 2 years, she had been the perfect victim, quiet, compliant, unwilling to fight back. But there was a limit to human endurance, and Chelsea Whitmore had just found it. "I said give it back," Maya repeated, and this time her voice carried across the cafeteria with unexpected steel. Chelsea's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. "Or what? You'll tell the principal? We all know nothing happens to people like me in this school. My family donates more money in a month than your dad makes in a year. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit back down, finish your pathetic lunch, and remember your place." The apple sailed through the air in a perfect arc. Chelsea had thrown it with just enough force to make a point, aiming for the trash can near Maya's table. But her coordination failed her, and the fruit struck Maya directly in the temple instead. The impact was sharp and unexpected. Maya stumbled backward, her hand flying to her face as pain exploded across her skull. The cafeteria erupted in gasps and nervous laughter. Someone shouted "World Star," while phones emerged from pockets to capture the scene. Maya's vision blurred momentarily, and when she blinked it clear, she saw Chelsea's expression shift from triumph to something that might have been concern, or perhaps just fear of consequences. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Chelsea announced loudly, her voice full of theatrical remorse for the benefit of watching students. "It was an accident." Maya, Are you okay? I was trying to throw it in the trash, and you moved at the wrong time. You saw that, right, everybody? It was an accident." Her friends immediately chorused their agreement. A practiced chorus of witnesses willing to rewrite reality to protect one of their own. Maya pressed her palm against her throbbing temple, feeling the heat of humiliation burning through her skin. She knew the truth, and everyone watching knew the truth, but truth had never mattered less than it did in this moment. The cafeteria monitor, a perpetually distracted substitute teacher, finally noticed the commotion and approached. "What's going on here? Maya, are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Maya heard herself say automatically, the words emerging before conscious thought. Because what was the alternative? Accuse Chelsea and face an investigation that would ultimately protect the rich girl while branding Maya as a troublemaker? Risk losing her scholarship over a bruised ego and a small wealth that would fade within hours. She had learned this lesson early. The system was not designed to protect people like her. See? She's fine. It was just an accident. Chelsea placed a hand on Maya's shoulder with false warmth. "No hard feelings, right?" Maya shrugged off the touch and gathered her belongings. She walked out of the cafeteria with her head high, ignoring the whispers and the cameras still recording. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. The careful control she had maintained for 2 years was beginning to crack. And she didn't know if she had the strength to hold it together much longer. In the bathroom, Maya locked herself in a stall and finally let the tears come. She cried silently, efficiently, giving herself exactly 3 minutes to fall apart before pulling herself back together. She had calculus in 10 minutes, and she refused to let Chelsea Whitmore make her miss class. She washed her face, examined the small red mark on her temple that would probably bruise, and made her way to her next class with mechanical precision. But that evening, when her father picked her up from school in his work van with Henderson's Auto Repair painted on the side, she didn't mention the incident. She didn't tell him about the drawing on her locker, or the thrown apple, or the daily accumulation of small cruelties that were slowly eroding her spirit. Instead, she smiled and asked about his day, because protecting him from worry felt more important than protecting herself from pain. The next morning brought a new horror. Maya arrived at school to find her locker vandalized again, but this time the attack was more sophisticated and far more damaging. Someone had forced open the lock and stuffed dozens of old newspapers inside, specifically articles about crimes committed by black individuals, carefully curated to create a racist narrative. The pages spilled out when she opened the door, cascading onto the floor in a waterfall of hateful implications. But that wasn't the worst part. Tucked among the newspapers was a printed photograph of her father taken without his knowledge, probably from the shop's website or social media. Someone had drawn prison bars across his face and written "like father," like daughter, across the bottom in red ink that looked disturbingly like blood. Maya's hands shook as she gathered the papers quickly, shoving them into her backpack before other students could see. But she was too slow. Chelsea and her friends had positioned themselves strategically, recording everything with their phones, capturing Maya's distress for posterity and entertainment. "What's wrong, Maya?" Chelsea asked with exaggerated concern. "Did someone leave you some reading material?" "That's actually really thoughtful. I know scholarship students don't always have access to current events." The hallway erupted in laughter. Maya felt her chest tighten, felt the walls closing in, felt 2 years of accumulated pain compressing into a single moment of unbearable pressure. She looked at Chelsea's smiling face, at the phones pointed in her direction, at the crowd of students who had become spectators to her suffering, and something inside her simply broke. "Why?" The word emerged as barely more than a whisper, but the raw emotion behind it silenced the laughter immediately. "Why do you hate me so much? What did I ever do to you?" Chelsea's smile faltered. For just a moment, genuine discomfort flickered across her features before her mask of cruelty snapped back into place. Hate you? Don't flatter yourself. You're not important enough to hate. You're just in the way. This school has standards, and you don't meet them. It's nothing personal. It's very personal, Maya replied, and her voice was steadier now, fueled by a righteous anger that had been building for months. You attack me every single day. You vandalize my locker. You mock my father. You throw things at me. And you act like I'm the problem for existing in the same space as you. But you know what the real problem is, Chelsea? The real problem is that I earned my place here through hard work and merit, while you bought yours with daddy's money. And that terrifies you, doesn't it? Because deep down, you know that without your last name, you're completely ordinary. The hallway went completely silent. Students who had been laughing moments before now stood frozen, shocked that quiet Maya Henderson had finally spoken up. Chelsea's face flushed red, her carefully constructed composure cracking as fury replaced amusement. You don't get to talk to me like that, Chelsea hissed, stepping forward into Maya's personal space. You don't get to judge me. You're nothing. You're nobody. And when I'm done with you, everyone in this school will know exactly what you are, a charity case who doesn't belong here. I belong here more than you do, Maya shot back, and the words felt like liberation. Because I understand the value of education. I don't take it for granted. I don't waste my time tormenting other students because I'm bored and empty inside. I actually care about learning, about growing, about becoming something more than a trust fund with legs. The crowd of students gasped collectively. Several people began recording with renewed interest, sensing that this confrontation had escalated beyond typical hallway drama. Chelsea's hands clenched into fists at her sides, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palms hard enough to leave marks. You're going to regret this, Chelsea promised, her voice low and dangerous. I promise you, Maya Henderson, you're going to regret ever speaking to me that way. Maya met her gaze without flinching. I already regret ever having to know you exist. She turned and walked away, leaving Chelsea standing in the middle of the hallway surrounded by witnesses to her embarrassment. It should have felt like victory. It should have felt empowering. But as Maya made her way to the bathroom to compose herself before class, all she felt was a deep sense of dread. She had broken the unspoken rules of their dynamic. She had fought back. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that Chelsea Whitmore would make her pay for that defiance in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The retaliation came swiftly and viciously. Within hours of their hallway confrontation, rumors began spreading through Jefferson High like poison in the water supply. Maya was a thief who stole money from the student activity fund. Maya was sleeping with teachers for better grades. Maya's scholarship was actually a diversity quota, and she wasn't really qualified to be at the school. Maya's father was under investigation for illegal activities at his auto shop. Each lie was more outrageous than the last, but repetition gave them weight, and by the end of the day, even students who had never spoken to Maya before regarded her with suspicion. But Chelsea wasn't finished. That afternoon, during the final period, Maya's phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had created a fake social media account using her name and photograph, and had posted a series of inflammatory comments attacking various student groups, faculty members, and school policies. The account had been active for less than an hour, but it had already been screenshot and shared widely, creating a permanent record of statements Maya had never made. When Maya tried to report the fake account, she discovered that Chelsea had anticipated this move. Multiple students came forward claiming they had seen Maya using her phone during class and making the exact comments that appeared on the fake account. They swore they had witnessed her typing them, had heard her bragging about it, had been present for conversations that had never actually occurred. Chelsea had orchestrated a perfect frame-up, complete with false witnesses and fabricated evidence. The vice principal called Maya into his office during last period. Richard Foster was a man in his 50s who wore expensive suits and maintained a careful political neutrality that allowed him to avoid confronting the school's wealthy families. He sat behind his large desk, looking at Maya with an expression of profound disappointment that made her stomach turn. "Maya, I'm going to be direct with you," Foster began, folding his hands on the desk. "We've received several complaints about your behavior today. Students say you've been making inappropriate comments, spreading rumors, and creating a hostile environment for your peers. I've also been made aware of a social media account with extremely concerning content. Far more dangerous opponents than a private school vice principal, and who was willing to burn down the entire system to protect his daughter. Review the evidence more carefully," Foster said finally. "The suspension will be put on hold pending a more thorough investigation. Maya may return to classes tomorrow while we complete our review." "She returned today," Marcus countered. "She's missed enough education because of this situation. And I'll be following up daily to ensure the investigation is conducted fairly and completely." They left the office together, father and daughter, walking through the hallways of Jefferson High with a new dynamic. Students who saw them stepped aside, sensing that something had shifted in the school's power structure. Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years' hope. Not naive hope that everything would magically improve, but the solid, grounded hope that came from knowing she wasn't alone, that she had an advocate willing to fight beside her. But neither of them realized that their confrontation with Foster had been overheard by a student, assistant working in the office, a junior named Tyler Morrison, who happened to be Chelsea Whitmore's cousin. By the time school ended that day, Chelsea knew everything that had been said, and she was already planning her response. If Maya thought bringing her father into the situation would protect her, she was about to learn a terrible lesson about the lengths wealthy families would go to maintain their power. The attack came 3 days later, after school, on the walking path that cut through Miller's Woods, a shortcut that students used to reach the public bus stop on Henderson Road. Maya had taken this path hundreds of times without incident, enjoying the brief passage through nature that separated the artificial world of Jefferson High from the rest of her life. The late afternoon sun filtered through the oak trees, creating patterns of light and shadow on the dirt trail, and Maya was reviewing her calculus notes while she walked, trying to make productive use of the 15-minute journey. She didn't hear them approaching until it was too late. 3 figures emerged from the trees ahead of her, blocking the path. Maya looked up from her notes and felt her stomach drop. Chelsea Whitmore stood in the center, flanked by 2 boys Maya recognized from the football team, Tyler Morrison and Jake Hastings. Both seniors, both large enough to make the threat implicit without saying a word. "Going somewhere? Scholarship, girl?" Chelsea asked, her voice devoid of its usual theatrical quality. This was different from the hallway confrontations, the cafeteria mockery, the social media campaigns. This felt dangerous in a way that made Maya's survival instincts scream at her to run, but there was nowhere to run. Behind her, 2 more figures emerged from the trees, Madison and Savannah, Chelsea's ever-present companions, cutting off the retreat path. Maya was surrounded, isolated in a stretch of woods where screaming would do no good because no one would hear her. "My dad is expecting me home in 20 minutes, Maya said, proud that her voice remained steady despite the terror flooding her system. "If I'm not there, he'll come looking for me." 20 minutes is a long time, Chelsea replied, stepping closer. "Long enough for you to learn an important lesson about respecting your betters. See, you embarrassed me, Maya. You spoke to me like we were equals, like your opinion mattered, like you had any right to judge me. That can't stand. People need to understand what happens when someone like you forgets their place." Jake Hastings held something that made Maya's blood run cold, an aluminum baseball bat. Expensive and well-maintained, probably from the school's equipment closet. He passed it casually from hand to hand, the metal catching the sunlight with sinister gleams. "We're not going to hurt you badly," Chelsea continued, her voice taking on a lecturing tone, as if explaining mathematics to a slow student. "Just enough to remind you that there are consequences for stepping out of line. Your dad can't protect you every day. The school can't watch you all the time. And you need to understand that I can reach you whenever I want, wherever I want, and make you regret your existence." Maya's mind raced, cataloging possible escape routes and finding none. She was athletic from years of playing basketball at the community center, but she was one person against 5, and at least one of them was armed with a weapon that could do serious damage. She thought about her father, about the conversation they'd had just that morning about standing up to injustice, and she realized with terrible clarity that sometimes standing up meant getting knocked down. "I'm not apologizing," Maya said, making a choice in that moment to maintain her dignity, even if she couldn't maintain her safety. "I'm not going to pretend you're right just because you have a weapon. You're a bully and a coward, Chelsea, and surrounding yourself with other cowards doesn't change that fundamental truth." Chelsea's face contorted with rage. "Hold her," she snapped at Tyler and Jake. They moved quickly, grabbing Maya's arms before she could react. Her backpack fell to the ground, spilling textbooks and papers across the dirt path. She struggled, but Jake's grip was like iron, his size and strength overwhelming her attempts to break free. Chelsea stepped forward, and for a moment, Maya thought she was going to strike her directly. Instead, Chelsea grabbed Maya's phone from her jacket pocket and threw it hard against a nearby tree. The device shattered on impact, pieces of glass and plastic scattering across the forest floor. Then she reached into Maya's fallen backpack and pulled out her calculus textbook, the expensive one that Maya's father had saved for months to purchase. The one with her careful notes in the margins. "Your father works hard, doesn't he?" Chelsea said softly, her voice dripping with malice. "Let's see how hard he'll have to work to replace this." She ripped pages from the textbook in handfuls, tearing through months of Maya's work with casual cruelty. Then she tossed the destroyed book into a muddy puddle and ground it with her designer shoe until the pages became an illegible pulp. "The bat." "Jake," Chelsea said, extending her hand. Jake hesitated for just a second, enough time for Maya to see a flicker of uncertainty in his expression. A moment where he seemed to question whether he really wanted to be part of whatever was about to happen. But peer pressure and loyalty to his social group won out over conscience. He handed Chelsea the aluminum bat. Chelsea held the bat, testing its weight, and Maya felt true fear course through her body. This had escalated beyond vandalism or humiliation. This was entering territory where serious physical harm became possible, where the prank crossed into assault, where the consequences could be permanent and life-altering. "Let me go," Maya said, hating the tremor that had entered her voice. "Please, you've made your point. Have I?" Chelsea mused, stepping closer with the bat held loosely in her right hand. "Because I don't think I have. I don't think you truly understand your situation yet. You're alone out here, Maya. No witnesses. No cameras. No father to defend you. Just you and us, and a very important lesson about power." She raised the bat, and Maya instinctively tried to pull away from Tyler and Jake's grip, but they held her firm. The bat came down not on Maya's head, but on her left shoulder, a controlled strike designed to cause pain without leaving visible marks on her face. The impact sent shock waves of agony through Maya's upper body, and she cried out despite her determination to remain silent. "That's for embarrassing me in the hallway," Chelsea said calmly. She raised the bat again. "This is for bringing your father to the school and threatening Mr. Foster." The second strike caught Maya on the same shoulder, and this time her legs buckled. Tyler and Jake were the only things keeping her upright, as waves of pain radiated from the point of impact. Maya's vision blurred with tears, and she heard herself making sounds she couldn't control, gasps and whimpers that shamed her, even as she couldn't stop them. "And this," Chelsea said, raising the bat a third time, her voice now thick with genuine malice, "is for thinking you could ever belong in our world." But the third strike never landed. Instead, a new voice cut through the clearing, deep, commanding, and vibrating with barely contained fury. "Put down the bat, now." Everyone froze. Chelsea turned toward the sound, and her face went pale as Marcus Henderson emerged from the tree line. He had come looking for his daughter when she didn't arrive home on time, following her usual route. And he had arrived in time to witness enough to understand exactly what was happening. Marcus Henderson was not a large man by modern standards, but he carried himself with the coiled tension of someone who had been trained to handle threats professionally. His work boots made no sound on the dirt path as he approached, and his expression was absolutely calm, the kind of calm that preceded violence. The kind that anyone with survival instincts would recognize as extremely dangerous. "Mr. Henderson." Chelsea's voice took on a false brightness, the bat lowering to her side as she attempted to shift into her usual performative mode. "Thank goodness you're here. Your daughter was being very aggressive, and we were just trying to. My daughter is being held by two boys, twice her size, while you threaten her with a weapon." Marcus interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. "I saw enough. I heard enough. Now put down the bat and step away from her." Chelsea looked at the adults in her life, parents, teachers, administrators, who had always accepted her explanations, who had always chosen to believe her version of events because it was more convenient than confronting an uncomfortable truth. She made the mistake of thinking this man would follow the same pattern. "I don't think you understand who I am," Chelsea said, attempting to assert dominance through status. "My father." "I don't care who your father is," Marcus said, taking another step forward. "Release my daughter, now." Tyler and Jake, sensing the shift in dynamics, let go of Maya's arms and stepped back quickly. Maya collapsed to her knees, cradling her injured shoulder, gasping for breath. Marcus didn't run to her immediately. Instead, he kept his eyes locked on Chelsea, who still held the bat. "You just assaulted a minor in front of a witness," Marcus said, his Marine training evident in his tactical assessment of the situation. "That's a felony. You're looking at serious criminal charges, possible juvenile detention, and a permanent record that will follow you for life. Put down the bat, and we can talk about how to resolve this situation. Or don't, and we'll let the police sort it out." Chelsea's hands tightened on the bat, and for a terrifying moment, Maya thought she might actually be reckless enough to swing at an adult. But reality finally penetrated her bubble of privilege. She dropped the bat, and it clattered to the ground between them. "This is a misunderstanding," Chelsea said, her voice losing its confidence. "We weren't actually going to hurt her badly. We were just... Savannah, please tell your mom I'm calling the police. Madison, I suggest you start thinking about whether you want to be an accessory to assault." Marcus pulled out his phone, and the click of his camera shutter echoed through the clearing as he documented the scene. The fallen bat, the torn textbook, Maya's visible injuries, the 5 students who had surrounded her. The group scattered then, fleeing into the woods like cockroaches when a light switches on. Only Chelsea hesitated, seemingly unable to process that her actions might actually have consequences. She looked at Marcus, and for the first time in her life, saw someone who was absolutely immune to her family's influence. Someone who would not be intimidated or bought or persuaded to look the other way. "My father will destroy you," she whispered, making one last attempt at maintaining her power. "Your business, your life, your daughter's future. We'll make sure you lose everything." Marcus knelt beside Maya, helping her to her feet with gentle hands that contrasted sharply with the lethal calm of his expression. He looked at Chelsea with something approaching pity. "Your father can try," he said simply, "but I've faced insurgents armed with AK-47s in Fallujah. I've conducted operations against people who actually knew how to wield power. And you know what I learned from 20 years in combat? The biggest threat rarely comes from the person making the loudest threats. It comes from the quiet people who document everything, who build airtight cases, who understand that justice is a marathon, not a sprint." He guided Maya toward the path, supporting her weight as she struggled to walk with her injured shoulder. "We're going to the hospital first, then the police station," he told her softly. "And we're going to make sure this gets handled properly, sweetheart. I promise you, this ends now." Behind them, Chelsea Whitmore stood alone in the clearing with the aluminum bat at her feet. And for the first time in her privileged life, she felt the cold touch of genuine fear. The emergency room doctor confirmed what Marcus had suspected. Maya had sustained a moderate contusion to her left shoulder, but no permanent damage. X-rays showed no fractures, though the bruising would be extensive and painful for weeks. The doctor also photographed her injuries for medical records, providing crucial documentation that would become evidence in the legal case that was rapidly taking shape. While Maya received treatment, Marcus sat in the hospital waiting room and made a series of phone calls. The first was to the Montgomery County Police Department, where he filed a formal report detailing the assault in Miller's Woods. The second was to a lawyer named Rebecca Martinez, a woman who specialized in civil rights cases and had a reputation for taking on powerful families without flinching. The third was to the superintendent of schools for the entire district, bypassing Vice Principal Foster entirely and going straight to the top of the administrative hierarchy. By the time they left the hospital that evening, the wheels of justice were already turning slowly. But with the inevitability of a glacier reshaping a landscape, the police investigation moved forward with surprising efficiency. Detective Sarah Chun, the officer assigned to the case, proved to be thorough and genuinely committed to uncovering the truth. She interviewed witnesses, reviewed the photographic evidence Marcus had collected, and obtained security footage from nearby businesses that captured Chelsea and her friends entering Miller's Woods around the time of the assault. Most damaging to Chelsea's defense was Tyler Morrison's conscience. 2 days after the incident, he appeared at the police station with his parents and provided a full statement detailing everything that had happened, including Chelsea's premeditated plan to teach Maya a lesson and Jake Hastings' reluctance to provide the bat. Tyler's testimony, combined with the physical evidence and Marcus's eyewitness account, created an overwhelming case against Chelsea Whitmore. But the true battlefield was not in the criminal justice system. It was in the court of public opinion and the politics of Jefferson High School. The Whitmore family launched a sophisticated counterattack, hiring expensive public relations consultants and lawyers who immediately began spinning the narrative. According to their version of events, Maya Henderson had been the aggressor, had threatened Chelsea, and the incident in the woods was actually self-defense by a frightened teenage girl who felt endangered by an angry scholarship student with a grudge. Local media outlets that depended on advertising from Whitmore family businesses parroted this narrative uncritically. The story became teen faces charges after altercation with scholarship student, with carefully selected photographs showing Chelsea looking young and vulnerable, while using Maya's school ID photo that made her look older and more severe. The campaign might have worked if not for an unexpected ally. Mrs. Eleanor Ashford was a retired teacher in her 70s who lived near Miller's Woods and walked her dog through the area every afternoon. She had seen the group of students surrounding Maya, had heard the threats and the sound of the bat striking and had been preparing to intervene when Marcus arrived. She had also recorded part of the incident on her phone, capturing audio of Chelsea's threats and the sounds of the assault. When Mrs. Ashford saw the Whitmore family's media campaign, she was so outraged by the lies that she contacted Detective Chun directly and provided her recording. The audio was unambiguous, capturing Chelsea's voice clearly threatening Maya and ordering the assault. It destroyed the self-defense narrative completely. The district attorney, reviewing the overwhelming evidence, filed charges against Chelsea Whitmore for assault with a weapon and conspiracy. Jake Hastings was charged as an accessory. Tyler Morrison received immunity for his cooperation. And suddenly, the story the media had been selling fell apart, replaced by the uncomfortable truth that a wealthy student had orchestrated a violent attack against a scholarship student and then attempted to escape accountability through her family's influence. The backlash was swift and brutal. Parents who had previously supported Chelsea began publicly distancing themselves from the Whitmore family. Students who had witnessed 2 years of bullying but remained silent suddenly found their voices, providing testimonies to school administrators about Chelsea's pattern of harassment. And crucially, several other students came forward with their own stories of being bullied by Chelsea and her circle, revealing a systematic campaign of psychological and social warfare that had targeted anyone deemed inferior by the school's social elite. Jefferson High School's board of directors was forced to acknowledge what they had been willfully ignoring for years, that they had created an environment where wealth trumped ethics, where powerful families operated above the rules, and where vulnerable students were sacrificed to maintain relationships with major donors. The scandal threatened the school's accreditation and reputation, forcing dramatic changes. Vice Principal Foster was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into his handling of Maya's complaints. A new anti-bullying task force was established with actual enforcement mechanisms rather than empty policies. And most significantly, Chelsea Whitmore was expelled from Jefferson High School, her admission to college revoked, her future fundamentally altered by the consequences of her actions. But for Maya Henderson, the victory felt hollow. She had won the battle, but the war had taken a toll that couldn't be measured in disciplinary actions or legal outcomes. She struggled with anxiety about returning to school, experienced nightmares about the assault, and wrestled with a fundamental loss of innocence about how the world worked. Her father recognized the signs immediately, having dealt with his own trauma during his military service. He found her a therapist who specialized in helping victims of violence process their experiences. He spent hours talking with her, listening to her fears and frustrations, helping her understand that surviving something terrible didn't mean pretending it hadn't affected her. Slowly, painfully, Maya began to heal. She returned to Jefferson High School for the final months of her junior year, walking through the hallways with a new awareness of her own strength. Students who had once ignored her now went out of their way to speak to her, to express admiration for her courage, to apologize for their previous complicity in her suffering. The spring semester brought unexpected changes to Jefferson High School. The new administration implemented sweeping reforms, including mandatory sensitivity training, a revamped reporting system for bullying incidents, and most significantly, a commitment to diversifying both the student body and the faculty. The school would no longer be a sanctuary for wealthy families seeking to isolate their children from reality, but rather an institution that actually lived up to its claimed values of excellence and integrity. Maya Henderson became something she had never sought to be: a symbol. Underclassmen approached her in the hallways, sharing their own experiences with bullying and thanking her for being brave enough to fight back. Teachers who had previously maintained careful neutrality now went out of their way to support her academic ambitions. writing recommendation letters and nominating her for scholarships. But the most unexpected development came from an impossible source. 6 weeks after her expulsion, Chelsea Whitmore requested a meeting with Maya through her lawyer. The request came with no preconditions and no expectations, simply a desire to speak face to face. If Maya was willing, Maya's first instinct was to refuse. The idea of sitting across from her tormentor, of voluntarily entering Chelsea's presence after everything that had happened, felt like a betrayal of her own healing process. But her therapist encouraged her to consider it, suggesting that closure sometimes required confronting uncomfortable truths rather than avoiding them. They met in a neutral location, a small conference room at the public library, with Marcus Henderson and Chelsea's mother both present as observers. Chelsea looked different from the confident bully who had ruled Jefferson High's social hierarchy. She wore simple clothes, no makeup, and carried herself with a defeated posture that suggested genuine suffering rather than strategic performance. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," Chelsea began, her voice quiet and devoid of its usual theatrical quality. "I don't deserve it, and I wouldn't believe you if you offered it. I'm here because my therapist says I need to take accountability for my actions directly, not through lawyers or press releases. And because I need you to know that I understand what I did to you." Maya listened silently, her expression carefully neutral, giving Chelsea no emotional feedback to work with. "I spent 2 years making your life hell," Chelsea continued, and tears began streaming down her face, real tears, not the manipulative crying she had deployed so effectively in the past. "I vandalized your locker. I spread rumors about you. I mocked your father. I threw things at you. And finally, I organized a group of people to assault you with a weapon in the woods. I did all of that not because you did anything wrong, but because you represented everything I was afraid of." She paused, struggling to compose herself. "You earned your place at Jefferson through merit. You worked hard. You were smart and kind and dignified. And I hated you for it because it reminded me that I hadn't earned anything in my life. Every opportunity I had was purchased by my family's money. Every achievement I claimed was facilitated by their influence. I was a fraud living in constant fear that someone would notice, and you were the living proof that people like me didn't actually deserve our positions." Maya finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "So you tried to destroy me to protect your ego?" "Yes," Chelsea admitted without hesitation. "And in the process, I destroyed myself. I'm expelled from Jefferson. I've been rejected from every college I applied to. My friends have all abandoned me. My father barely speaks to me. And worst of all, I have to live with the knowledge that I'm the kind of person who would hurt someone just to feel powerful. I'm 18 years old, and the defining fact of my existence is that I'm a monster." The word hung in the air between them. Maya studied Chelsea's face, searching for signs of manipulation or performance, but finding only genuine self-loathing. It was strange and uncomfortable to see her tormentor suffering, to recognize that Chelsea's punishment extended far beyond legal consequences into existential crisis. "You're not a monster," Maya said finally, surprising herself with the words. "You did monstrous things, but that's not the same as being irredeemable. Monsters don't feel remorse. Monsters don't acknowledge their victim's humanity. You're just a person who made terrible choices and now has to live with the consequences." Chelsea looked up, hope flickering in her expression. "Does that mean you forgive me?" "No," Maya replied immediately. "Forgiveness isn't something you can ask for or demand. It's something that might happen over time or might not happen at all, and you have to accept that. What I can tell you is that I don't want to spend the rest of my life defined by what you did to me. I want to move forward, to build a life based on my own choices and achievements, not on my status as your victim. So I'm choosing to let go of the anger I feel toward you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. It was the most mature thing Maya had ever said, and she could see in her father's expression that he was proud of her, in a way that transcended the usual parental satisfaction. She had taken an experience that could have broken her and used it to forge something stronger, not just healing, but wisdom. Chelsea nodded, accepting Maya's boundaries without argument. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said. "And for what it's worth, I hope you get into MIT and become the engineer you always wanted to be. You deserve success more than anyone I've ever met." They didn't hug. They didn't exchange social media information or promise to stay in touch. They simply acknowledged each other's humanity one final time before walking away, each carrying the weight of their shared history in different ways. The final weeks of Maya Henderson's junior year at Jefferson High School passed in a blur of standardized tests, college application preparations, and social dynamics that felt alien after everything she had experienced. She had become someone different from the quiet scholarship student who once tried to make herself invisible in the hallways. She walked with confidence now, spoke her mind without fear, and had cultivated a small group of genuine friends who valued her for her character rather than her social status. The end-of-year award ceremony brought an unexpected honor. The school's new principal, Dr. James Morrison, announced the establishment of a new scholarship in Simone Henderson's name, funded by an anonymous donor and designated for students who demonstrated extraordinary resilience in the face of adversity. Maya was the first recipient, and as she walked across the stage to accept the award, the entire auditorium rose in a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. But the most profound moment came after the ceremony, when Maya found her father waiting for her in the parking lot, leaning against his newly repaired truck with an expression of such pure pride that it made her throat tighten with emotion. "Your mother would be so proud of you," Marcus said, pulling his daughter into a tight embrace. "She always said you had more strength than you knew. I think you've proven her right." They drove home together through the Georgia evening, the summer sun setting over a landscape that felt both familiar and transformed. Maya thought about everything that had happened: the bullying, the assault, the investigation, the slow process of healing, and realized that she had been given a terrible gift. She had learned at 17 what many people never learn in a lifetime: that justice is possible, but never guaranteed. That courage means continuing forward even when you're terrified, and that the truest measure of character is not what you do when life is easy, but how you respond when it becomes unbearable. That summer, Maya worked at her father's auto shop, learning the practical skills of engine repair and business management. She spent evenings working on her college essays, transforming her experiences into powerful narratives about resilience and social justice. And she volunteered with a local organization that provided support services to victims of bullying, using her story to help other students find their voices and advocate for themselves. When her college acceptance letters arrived the following spring, Maya had options she had never dared imagine. MIT accepted her with a full scholarship. Stanford made a compelling offer. Harvard invited her to join their engineering program. But ultimately, Maya chose to attend a historically black college in Atlanta, a decision that surprised some people, but made perfect sense to her. "I spent 2 years being told I didn't belong in predominantly white spaces," she explained to her father as they discussed the decision. "Now I want to spend 4 years in a place where my presence is celebrated rather than challenged, where I can focus on learning and growing without constantly defending my right to exist in the room. I need that foundation before I go out and change the world." Marcus understood completely. He had fought his own battles against systemic racism during his military service, had navigated predominantly white institutions where his competence was constantly questioned. He knew that sometimes the bravest choice was not to integrate hostile spaces, but to seek out environments where you could thrive without apology. The day Maya left for college, Marcus stood in the driveway of their home and watched his daughter load boxes into her car, the same daughter who had once been attacked in the woods, who had been systematically bullied and told she didn't belong, who had survived an attempt to destroy her future. She was heading toward opportunities that previous generations of their family could never have imagined, carrying with her the lessons learned through pain and the strength forged in adversity. "Remember what your mother used to say," Marcus called out as Maya prepared to drive away. "Don't let them make you small." Maya smiled, thinking about all the ways she had been tested, all the attempts to diminish her spirit and deny her dignity, and all the times she had refused to surrender to other people's limited expectations. "I won't, Dad," she promised. "I'm done being small." She drove away toward her future, leaving behind the hallways of Jefferson High School and the woods where she had once been attacked, but carrying forward the most important lesson: that true power doesn't come from wealth or social status or the ability to intimidate others. It comes from knowing your worth regardless of what others say, from standing firm in your values when the world demands compromise, and from understanding that every act of courage, no matter how small, contributes to a larger battle for justice that extends far beyond any individual story. The bullying had not broken her. It had revealed what was already there, a strength she had inherited from her mother and father, a resilience that could withstand storms that would destroy lesser spirits, and a commitment to building a world where no other child would have to endure what she had survived. And in the end, that was the real victory. Not the legal consequences her attackers faced, not the reforms implemented at Jefferson High School, not even her acceptance to prestigious universities, but the simple fact that Maya Henderson had refused to let cruelty define her story. She had written her own ending, and it was filled with hope.